she lied to Parliament. She lied to Parliament. This Integrity Commission thing, it's more like oversight, right? It's like a smokescreen that they're just trying to put in front of us because they don't actually want us to get to the end of things. But the one thing that it cannot do is enforce decisions. So welcome to Be Frank with Mac. A lot of us watch the news. We see what happens on a daily basis in South Africa as well as the world. There's news coming in and out of our ears. So what we thought we'd do here on Be Frank with Mac is to maybe have a conversation with you. Let's speak about what has been happening in our world and how it impacts us. Throughout the week, you see the news coming in. If it's not the MacG Commission, it's Donald Trump. If it's not Donald Trump, it's something that is happening somewhere in the world. So let's have a frank conversation about some of this news and let's just see how maybe it impacts us. So on Thursday, the 16th of April, the leader of the economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, was sentenced to 5 years direct imprisonment. This after he shot a firearm into the air at an EFF rally in 2018. Yes, not smart, I know. Originally, he was charged alongside his bodyguard and the owner of the firearm in question, who is Adrian Snyman, who has since been acquitted. Opele Adrian Snyman, Adrian Snyman. So obviously, Malema believes his sentencing is politically motivated. He said this loud and clear when he addressed his supporters outside the KwaGumbo Magistrates Court. He said, "We are here because AfriForum wants to silence the voice of black people." CIC at his best. Now, his sentencing has supporters on both sides. Those who agree with the sentence handed out by Judge Olivier for direct imprisonment and those who are against it. Some say yes. The duration of the case itself, 8 whole years, is a clear indicator of it being politically motivated. But no one was harmed and the owner of the gun was present. For me, a bit problematic. Just because the owner was there, you don't take somebody's gun and shoot it into the air when there's a lot of people in public. You should have known better, right? But let's see how this one goes. Others are saying that the charges against Snyman were just a facade since he was acquitted, while the maximum possible 15-year imprisonment sentence was pursued for Malema. Is that overreach? I don't know. Are they trying to teach him a lesson? I don't know. Is he being made an example? I don't know. Right? What we have known from the start is that Malema intends to appeal this. He hasn't been very, very secretive about that. And whether you love him or hate him, this time around, the law is on his side. You see, here's the thing about privilege and access, right? It affords you opportunities like this, where you have access to information and you know what rights you have, as well as the privilege to be able to exercise those rights. I can't even begin to imagine how many South Africans are languishing in prisons around the country, not because they didn't commit a crime, but because they didn't have the same resources and access to information as Malema. They're now left serving ridiculous sentences. Because you see, perspective is a real thing, guys. We have to watch how this actually plays out, because trust and believe, the CIC is not going to take this lying down. He's not going to take this lying down. He's going to fight this to the nth degree. Because even when you listen to the arguments that are coming out in public with regards to this, a lot of people feel that the sentence was too harsh. Oscar Pistorius, I don't think he served more than 5 years in jail. I stand to be corrected, right? But he killed someone. Julius, shot in the air. Wrong, we agree. But such a harsh sentence, yet, I don't know, you be the judge. Speaking about judges and the courts, in 2023, a judge's secretary who was based out of the Eastern Cape High Court, Ms. Andiswa Mengo, filed a sexual harassment complaint against Judge President Selby Benenge. Now, The complaint centers on allegations of sexual misconduct involving Judge Benenge and Ms. Mengo, spanning both physical and digital spaces, namely via WhatsApp messages. What has come out in a complaint at the time, Ms. Mengo says the interaction was unsolicited, unsolicited. It was unwanted, and it was also unwelcome.
It started off very respectfully. There was nothing wrong with how the respondent began communicating with the complainant, nor with her responses. The respondent then started sending suggestive emojis, and by suggestive I'm referring specifically, Chair, to the closed eyes emoji being used within that specific sequence of the pervy eyes, the licking of the lips, where the pervy eyes were used more than once by the respondent. Chair, in this text chain so far, we have not seen, from the text messages that I saw here, that we're seeing, the complainant has not yet used the pervy eyes emoji.
Now, Judge Benenge's response, or his defense, to that complaint at the tribunal were wild, to say the least. Like, I was like, lo baba. So let me take you through them. Judge Benenge said that his interest in Mengo was sparked after they, also I could say if, this name Mengo, his interest in Mengo, wow. Anyway, was sparked after they met in another judge's chambers where he commented on her youthful appearance. Judge. So according to him, the interest was sparked by Mengo's mannerism, how she spoke and how she held herself. Papa. Having no excuse for this trashy, predatory behavior, Benenge's advocate Skakani said, in East Xhosa culture, men were expected to persist when in pursuit of a woman, no matter how often she said no. That is how it is done. How? That in Benenge. When you carry on. Now, let's put this into context, right? With South Africa's femicide and rape statistics being what they are, I don't think that these are views that should be held by any man. Judge. These are views that should not be held by any man who claims to be a positive example of masculinity for his family, worst of all, for the country at large. For a very long time, Mangamla, non-blacks, they viewed African people, our culture, and our traditions very negatively. And this kind of behavior perpetuates that nonsense. Now, for Judge Benenge to defend what was so clearly a lapse in judgment, and for him to come out and make those statements, for me, it's absolute bullshit. You're a judge, for crying out loud. You're a lawmaker. And you're looking at a youthful appearance in another judge's chambers, and you make comments like that. It's disgusting. It's unbecoming for a judge president. And for him to come out and appear as though he doesn't understand how and what is going on, it's concerning. It's an insult to all the women who've been raped, harassed, and taken advantage of by powerful men in the workplace. It depletes their voices. He's an academic. He's a lawmaker for all intents and purposes. He should know and absolutely do better. If you listen to some of those WhatsApp, the language that was on those WhatsApps. I mean, when you're sitting there as a judge president, how do you feel witnessing and hearing the inappropriateness of this? Worst of all, Unaduzi Malema, and it was as if he sees absolutely nothing wrong with this. For me, that's problematic. Because how does my daughter trust the courts? How does my daughter go stand in front of a magistrate or a judge knowing it's abhorrent? Let's now go to global news. If you remember, and you're a follower of Be Frank with Mac, and you've been watching the show from the very first episode, you'll remember that we sat down with an AfriCID senior researcher and director, and this was Thembisa Fakude. I think we had the interview just mere days after Iran and Dubai had been bombed, when the bombing started out in the Middle East. Now, during that episode, he foretold the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, and weeks later, indeed it closed. So, the Strait of Hormuz, and not Hummus. I know you guys maybe sometimes hummus and you want to put it. No, not hummus. Hormuz, right? We want to know why Hormuz matters and why we should care, South Africans, right? Let me tell you why. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow strip of water about 33 kilometers wide, but it carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE depend on it. How do we work oil money? Oil money touching from there. So if anything happens in Hormuz, if it sneezes, global markets catch pneumonia. Rona, outlonzo flunyan, ke Hormuz. Okay. So this is what's happening there right now. Iran has reportedly deployed naval mines in the Gulf, and a lot of them are unaccounted for. At the same time, there's been a UN resolution to ease tensions, and this has been vetoed by Russia and China. Be that as it may, the situation still remains quite volatile, with no clear diplomatic path forward. So, you've got instability in the region, and no one is agreeing on how to fix it. Iran is standing its ground, right? They've come out to say that, hey, you want to open the Strait of Hormuz? Find the key. But the thing that's important for us is, why should South Africans care, right? Why does it matter to me? I'm sitting in Soweto, Piri Mapetla, Zolamten. I don't know, Hamashashani, But this is why it's important that you should understand why Hormuz is important, right? Number one, oil prices have spiked globally. Petrol prices have gone up. At the beginning of April, I think around the beginning of April, petrol rose by about 3 Rand 6 cents per litre. Diesel went up by 7 Rand 51 cents per litre. Paraffin, 11 Rand 67 per litre. And these are things that are important. And you look at something like paraffin, you think, paraffin stove. The poorest of the poor are impacted by these kind of things, right? And when transport costs increase, there's a sort of cumulative impact on everything else. Because if transport is expensive, food prices, trust and believe, are next. So it's not just something that's over there. It's not something that's happening in the Middle East. It lands right in your pocket. It's affecting us. It's impacting us every time you're in the line. Hey, super, void. Those prices, they're affecting you. They're affecting you, right? So now let's also look at why this has all happened, because there's this yellow or orange man that seems like a lunatic, and I think we all agree that he's a bit of a loony bin, right? Donald Trump is floating ceasefire talks while still maintaining military pressure. That's what's happening, ne? What's happening when you were naughty and they said to you, "Tsamolata tupa kitlo sharp." I understand. It's like you feel like you want to go outside and search the whole day and not come back, but best believe, come back with that stick so that batlo now sharp, all right? Your mother's like, go get the slip, I'm gonna come and smack you, right? It's almost like diplomacy with a warning label, right? While global oil is under pressure, right? How is this now coming back to South Africa? And how is this impacting South Africa? And what does it mean for you? We still don't know if there's going to be any resolution anytime soon. But what we do know for a fact is that costs are becoming higher. Iran is digging in its heels. Israel is not listening to anyone. And the world seems to be going further and further up Schitt's Creek. I don't know. Let me bring it back home. I'm sure a lot of you drive around and there's an interesting trend that we've seen, right? If you think about back in the days, every second car that you saw was either a Toyota, a Nissan, a VW, or a Datsun for that matter, depending on where it is that you come from or where you live, right? But there's something that's more interesting that is happening in South Africa, where we're seeing Chinese imports starting to flood the market. There's a noticeable difference and increase in vehicles in South African roads. You can't change lanes without seeing one. You'll know that the newer cars that you're seeing on the roads, you can't even pronounce them. Baik, Beijing, Omoda, Jetour, Sherry, Haval. The list goes on. BYD, Every second car that you see, you can't even pronounce, But this isn't something that has happened by accident. It's economics, right? A lot of people will tell you now in this day and age, when you look at BMW, VW, Audi, they have started becoming incredibly expensive. I look at a Cherry Tiggo, for example, it will cost you something maybe about 700,000 Rand, 7-seater, electronic seats. Bono, wapresa, man. Wapresa. Everything just moves, wapresa, right? And if you do a cost comparison between that Cherry Tiggo and a BMW X3, right? Let's not even go to X5. An X3 will cost you probably about $1 million. This one here, maybe about 600,000. So it's almost a $500,000 difference, right? And it goes to say that consumers are under pressure. The only direction the unemployment chart right now is doing is moving up. The powers that be have stayed mum about an actionable solution for the dire state of the country's automotive industry. Look at Sherry, right? Sherry has recently bought the Nissan factory in Pretoria, and that leaves thousands of families suddenly without an income. The VW factory in Eastern Cape is quite literally fighting for its life with an estimated 4,000 jobs at stake. So us, as ordinary South Africans, Rajasta, tightening the belt. I think we're now at a point where we're not even tightening the belt. We're going to start eating this belt, right? We're fighting to survive. But I always say that you must always ask yourself, who is benefiting from this influx of these cheaper, non-South African produced alternatives? Because now in our country, we can't just take things at face value. If you've been watching the Madlanga Commission, nothing is make sure in this country anymore, So come in a lady by the name of Sisi Tolashe. You don't know Sisi Tolashe? Okay. This is not someone that's just a junior figure. She's a cabinet minister. She's a senior ANC politician. She's president of the ANC Women's League. So when her name comes up, this is not just a side story. We're speaking about central government. We're speaking about power. Let me tell you. In 2025, a Chinese representative donated 2 BAIC Beijing X55 SUVs. They were worth close to R1 million combined. These vehicles were intended for the ANC Women's League. You see where I'm going, ne? Okay. So let's fast forward to February 2026. Tolashe comes out and tells Parliament that the vehicles were handed over. And then, zang, 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 zang. The ANC confirms, we've never received those vehicles. The Women's League comes out and says, and we also haven't seen those vehicles. We go to the registration records. Now they show that the cars went to her children. And they were never declared in Parliament. So this issue is no longer something that's just vague. It's a clear contradiction on record. She lied to Parliament. She lied to Parliament. So the question is now, where's the accountability? We know her position. We know what she has said. We know that she has lied, and it's fact, it's no longer lies. So the ANC General Secretary, Fikile Mbalula, says that the matter goes to the Integrity Commission, which has been chaired by Frank Chikane. Now, this commission can investigate, it can recommend action, but the one thing that it cannot do is enforce decisions. That sits with the ANC's National Executive Committee. Now, let me take you back, because this is the exact same minister who reportedly appointed a 21-year-old as the chief of staff. Because obviously, nothing screams administrative excellence like a TikTok-era governance. Guys, nagzib. And for me is that it's not just that. It's the questionable overseas trip, the 2 cars that went through, lying to Parliament. And it says to me that this Integrity Commission thing, it's more like oversight, right? It's like a smoke screen that they're just trying to put in front of us because they don't actually want us to get to the end of things. Because, what pisses me off about a lot of these things is that we never ever see accountability, guys. Somebody will be suspended, they come back, they get a better position, or they get moved somewhere else, right? And it's still our money. It's still our money. It's taxpayers' money that pay their damn salaries. So we can't keeping quiet. You know, it almost brings me back to a conversation that I had with Faith Mangope on the show, where she said, and then what? Okay, Integrity Commission, and then what? Because, I mean, you almost have to admire the efficiency, right? While these policymakers debate the tariffs and industrial protection, what is happening, you know, she's like, oh, distribution, you want distribution? My children are there, they're the first ones ready to take this Chinese import. These are things that are meant to be coming for us. These are things that are supposed to be creating jobs for our children, increasing on your manufacturing industry, but they just don't give a shit. So as much as we are seeing these global oil shocks, and we're worried whether we can afford petrol or not, local politics, they've already decided how they're going to get around, because they get things for free, right? At our cost. When you think about these things, you understand why people want to leave the country. You understand why people are like, I don't want to be here anymore. You understand why people are depressed, right? Because, you know, you almost have to zoom out and look at what is happening. It's not just about one minister or about one scandal. It's about how the system is now functioning overall, or, for lack of a better word, not functioning at all. We've seen the military being deployed internally. The police and almost every other law enforcement agency in our country is under scrutiny at the Madlanga Commission. Senior officials are being called to explain how governance failures have happened. This is all happening in real time, guys. The state is both responding to crisis and also testifying about their own failures. Where's the leadership? Where does President Ramaphosa fit in all of this? Because he's also at the center, right? Not just as a figurehead, but as the person that's ultimately responsible for cabinet appointments, oversight of ministers, and the functioning of the executive. Yet he's got his own controversy. He's been under pressure following the couch cash. As president, president ATM. So he gets its ATM in his own little couch, right? Phala Phala. This is where large sums of foreign currency were stolen from his private farm, which he initially failed to report through normal channels. We're now looking at a declassified report into that matter, and it has brought the issue back into public focus. What happened, guys? Because while ministers are being investigated, our institutions are under strain, the president himself is facing renewed scrutiny. The picture the public is dealing with is this. One part of the state is on the ground trying to restore order. Another is sitting under oath explaining how things fell apart. And at the very helm of all of this, at the top of all of this, the person in charge is also having to answer questions. I don't even know if a cabinet reshuffle will help, right? Because it's starting to feel a lot less like governance and more like rearranging the same cast in some fucking soapy that has no ending. We are letting our people down. The country is burning. We are above 40% unemployment. The youth don't have jobs. The very people that are supposed to protect us are stealing for us. The very people that are supposed to be leading us are the ones that also have their hands in the cookie jar. So we constantly have to ask ourselves, where are we going? When is it going to be enough? We now look at the damage control that's now needs to be done, because obviously nobody wants to, nobody wants to piss off the United States, right? Nobody wants to be in their bad books, right? At some point, eventually, Donald Trump will leave and there'll be a new president, and hopefully somebody that will sweep all of this rubbish that Donald Trump has done. But be that as it may, we don't want to be in the bad books of the United States. They also are still one of our biggest trading partners, right? So is this a chess move by President Ramaphosa to appoint Roelf Meyer, right? Is it diplomacy, or has he once again scored an own goal? We don't know, right? So let's maybe look at that sort of tripartite alliance between Roelf Meyer, Cyril Ramaphosa, and Donald Trump. So in the middle of all of this, on Wednesday, We all woke up to the news that Roelf Meyer would be headed to Washington as South Africa's ambassador to the United States.
Roelf Meyer is a South African, a very loyal and patriotic South African who has distinguished himself in a number of areas where he has worked.
Now, this is not something that's insignificant. It isn't. Because Roelf Meyer isn't just a political figure. He's one of the key architects of South Africa's negotiated transition. A man who was at the table during one of the most delicate periods in the country's history. He sat alongside Ramaphosa. President Ramaphosa himself confirmed the appointment, and for many people, it raised a lot of questions. Is this something that we're doing for diplomacy, or is it about the correct messaging, right? Trump claims that, there's an Afrikaner genocide, right? A lot of this has been widely disputed. Yet even when the alleged Afrikaner refugees came back to South Africa, to this point and right up until now, Trump hasn't let go of the lies. So are we saying then that the timing starts to look a little bit deliberate by this appointment of Roelf Meyer? When you send a figure like Roelf Meyer, someone associated with negotiation, someone associated with compromise, the old South Africa meeting the new, coming into that environment. I mean, even from his own people, for lack of a better word, there's some that feel that he betrayed them. He betrayed them at the negotiations as well. That, he sided with the blacks for this transition. He sold them out, etc., etc. There's South Africans that still feel that, but he was also, a minister in defense, and, there's comrades that might have been assassinated, under his watch, etc. But we had the transition, guys. We all agreed to the Rainbow Nation and this sort of kumbaya moment of Codesa to get South Africa to where it is. So is he the right person? We don't know. But from a diplomatic point of view, a staunch Afrikaner that knows apartheid, that understands the transition, sitting across Trump, will it make him listen? Will it make that yellow lunatic or orange lunatic finally say, maybe you are right, there isn't a genocide? Nobody knows. But this is definitely a tightrope that it has to be walked, because if it's about stabilizing relations, this appointment makes strategic sense. But if it's seen as responding to a narrative that isn't grounded in fact, then it also then risks validating the very thing that the government is trying to neutralize. You must remember that in diplomacy, perception travels faster than policy itself. Sometimes who you send says far more than what you actually say. So let's wait and see. Roelf Meyer, go represent us. Let's see if in some way or the other, Trump will listen to you. There's a very bizarre story, right? That took place on our very shores. And I don't know if you've been following it, but Eritrean footballers in South Africa in 2026 disappeared, right? Now, let me give you a bit of context around this. Under President Isaias Afwerki, Eritrea operates a system of indefinite national service. They've got forced conscription, meaning that you're forced to go into the army when you reach a specific age. There's restricted movement. There's a near total suppression of dissent. There are no elections. There's no free press. And if you leave the country without permission, that is effectively illegal. Also, in most countries, it's illegal. But Eritrea, it's on steroids. So in April 2026, during a 2027 Africa Cup of Nations qualifying campaign, there were about 7 Eritrean footballers who went missing while traveling through South Africa. Red flags, right? They were on their way home after a match against Eswatini. Reports indicate that only 3 of the 10 locally based players returned to Eritrea, while the rest disappeared during transit via South Africa and Egypt. The missing players were part of a squad that just achieved a rare qualification milestone, Eritrea's first AFCON qualification. This was their stage appearance in nearly 2 decades. Now, before, the delegation was split during travel, with the disappearances being confirmed by multiple international reports in April. However, despite all of this, Eritrea continues to participate in international fixtures. Now, on the surface, this maintains a sense of normalcy and global engagement. But this is what it looks like in reality. It creates controlled windows through which individuals can attempt to leave. So what has happened here is that football has now become more than a sport. It becomes geography, opportunity, and risk all at once. And while in this context, what has happened is quite extreme, the underlying theme is familiar. Systems that restrict movement inevitably create pressure points where people will always try to exit. We see that at the Beitbridge border. We see it on our very borders in South Africa, whether it be Zimbabwe, whether it be Mozambique, whether it be in Zambia. If there are systems that fail or laws that oppress, people will always find a way of leaving. I think it's been an absolutely hectic week for all of us. It's been heavy. We've watched the Madlanga Commission. We've seen many stories. We've all breathed a sigh of relief when, there was a ceasefire out in the Strait of Hormuz. Unfortunately, we also got to see the killing of, another municipal worker, etc. But there's been a lot that's happened this week. But there is always that sort of slither of hope. There's always that slither of positivity in our country, right? So positive for us, right? I don't know for Ditsotsi whether this is positive or not and those that are stealing, right? But however, on Friday morning, there was news of a new appointment for Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Now, this appointment of his is going to lead to a major national crime fighting initiative, which is going to be targeting organized crime across the country. In an interview, Mkhwanazi retains his position as Police Commissioner of KZN. He said he wants the work of this unit to go as far as investigating politicians, government employees, as well as illegal tendering. If a construction tender given a certain amount of time to complete, they will be watching if it isn't, because that's how thousands turn into billions, right? Having this new sort of unit that's going to be investigating these things, hopefully for all of us, we'll start to see people in orange overalls. Hopefully, we'll start to see accountability. Hopefully, we'll start seeing change in our country, because this Pandora's box that has been left wide open for politicians, businessmen, and crooks to run amok in our country is going to destroy us all. So good luck to Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. Good luck to you that are avid watchers of Be Frank with Mac. And I hope to see you on the next one. Stay safe. Because frankly speaking, I don't know what's going on. I hope you do.
Emhlabeni kaJehova subscribe nina futhi nibabi if ubhekele channel for 10 minutes longer and aka subscribe umubi dog. That's why bakuchithela ngoba awuna commitment, unama commitment issues. Subscribe lapho ngeke sizwe ngawo.